I'm pretty confident that most hunters' favorite time to chase bucks is during the rut. The rut is when there's so many does receptive, the bucks are just going everywhere. They're either trailing a doe or cutting through the area, trying to scent check and find another doe. Having defined the rut, let's talk about some great strategies to help you connect with the buck during the rut. It's a frenzy of activity, and research has shown bucks actually cover more ground or go more steps. That doesn't necessarily mean a bigger area, but more steps within their home range, more time during daylight hours, and it seems hunters are more likely to cross paths with the buck during the rut. The rut's a bell-shaped curve when the most does are receptive. There's going to be a few does start real early, even September, builds up, goes up real steep, and at that peak, that's going to be the center of the rut throughout most of the whitetails range, right around November 13th, somewhere right in there. Contrary to a lot of theories out there, the rut is at the same time year after year after year. It's not dependent on the moon or the weather. Think about it, fawns are born at the same time year after year. You start seeing spotted fawns about the same time. If the rut shifted a whole bunch, like some people think, fawns would be born too early, especially up north, be born in the snow, or too late, and they would not gain enough weight to survive the oncoming winter. So we know when the rut is. It may be hot, may be cold, may be raining sideways, but that's when the rut is going to occur. And it certainly doesn't shift the peak of the rut on any individual property unless there's a major change in food resources or the adult sex ratio. We've already said that multiple research studies based on GPS collared bucks show that bucks move more steps during the day during the rut. They're covering more ground, but that doesn't mean they're all over the county. In fact, research is pretty clear that bucks just use the full extent of their home range during the rut, sort of a portion, and they rarely get outside that unless they kind of overlap with the receptive doe. Her home range is here, his is here, and they overlap a little bit. He may follow her, and there's cases with GPS studies where, 24 to 36 hours, the buck's over here, then it's a beeline back to his home range. We can't talk to deer to know what they're thinking, but it sure seems like they just feel safer, more comfortable. It makes sense. They know where the roads are, the predators are, the hunting stands are. They know how to avoid danger within their home range. We can use this to our advantage, knowing deer take more steps, no matter what the weather is, no matter what's going on. The first thing is just be present. You got to be out there during the rut. We all hope for that frosty morning, solid wind, about 10 miles an hour from one direction, but it seems that rarely happens. So no matter what the conditions are, you want to be out there during the rut. Then you kind of break it down whether you're bow hunting or gun hunting. I'm going to start with firearms hunting because the rut occurs during firearm season in Missouri. If I'm using a firearm during the rut, I want to be where I can use that weapon's capacity. I want to be able to see, 200, 300, 400 yards, whatever it is. And a strategy I've used many years successfully is overlooking thick cover. I'm not talking brush 10 feet tall where you can't see into it. That wouldn't serve a purpose. I live in the Ozark Mountains, and I often like to get on one ridge looking into the cover on the other ridge. So I've seen a lot of mature bucks and harvested a lot of mature bucks using that. Oh my. And my theory is that receptive does go in thick cover because there may be 3 or 4 bucks harassing her, trying to chase her down, and she can avoid those bucks a bit by being in thick cover. I have noticed that, you got a field and you see 20 does pouring out there every day during the rut. You won't see a lot of mature bucks there, and I don't think there's a lot of receptive does there. Receptive does, we know from research, tend to drop or get away from their fawns and go off to a different part of their home range, probably to avoid exposing those fawns to the danger of a really amped up mature buck. So those does tend to go to a brushy area. A buck's going to find them, that's for certain, but so they can have some cover or escape cover from 3 or 4 bucks chasing her relentlessly. You may not have that situation where you are, but you may have a utility easement, a power line right away or something that's short enough to see the vitals of a deer in, and you can cover 300-400 yards down that easement with thick cover on both sides. This is a great technique here in the hill country and in flatter land. I remember some hunts Daniel had where he tagged a really good buck using just that strategy, looking down a steep power line easement.
Holy cow.
If you don't have access to hunting over cover like that, you want to be where bucks are traveling. They're either with a receptive doe, and when they're with a doe, you're probably not going to harvest them. They may bed down, not cover a big area for 24 to 36 hours. But when that buck finishes there and goes seeking another doe, they're going to be traveling. And so travel routes, again, pinch points from one big property to another. When I say big property, I'm not talking land ownership, a core group of does here, a core group of does here. Those pinch points going from habitat to habitat can be really hot places during the rut. You may locate such pinch points by knowing creek crossings or bends in big rivers where they're always cutting the edge of it. Something that pinches them down or bottlenecks them in, whatever language you use, and bucks are going from one place to another, and that narrow part of the hourglass is where they're traveling through. The rut is one time a year you want to hunt a lot of hours. Even during the rut, it's a crepuscular cycle or dawn and dusk. There's going to be more movement in the morning, early in the morning and late afternoon. But if that buck finishes with a doe and goes seeking another, that could happen any time of day. If you're going to pack your lunch and stay all day, the best time to do that is during the rut.
Growing Deer is brought to you by Bass Pro Shops and Cabela's. Also by Green Cover Food Plots, Winchester, PH Outdoors, Moultrie Mobile, Steel, Fleet Outdoor Apparel, Morel Targets, Fourth Arrow, Soil Pro Outdoors, Scorpion Venom Archery, Case IH Tractors, Burris Optics, G5 Broadheads, Prime Bows, and Redneck Hunting Blinds.
A technique we've used over and over and over and talked about a lot, and some people still doubt us even though we've shown them, is when you're rifle hunting or bow hunting, but preferably rifle hunting, during the rut, tag that first doe you can. It's more venison for the freezer. You're helping balance that adult sex ratio, making that rut a little tighter, and bucks are gonna come check that doe. They will check non-receptive does, and we've seen this, we've videoed it. This has been an extremely successful technique for us, and I gotta tell you, opening morning of firearm season, one of my goals is to harvest a doe in an area I can watch and make a successful shot. In those states where it's bow season during the rut, those pinch points or travel corridors are critical. Not necessarily a food source. We know that bucks lose about 30% of their body weight during the rut. They're obviously not eating as much as the rest of the year. You may see a buck stop and take a few bites and then move on. I'd rather gamble at that time of year on a good pinch point, maybe a ridge top, a long ridge, or they're traveling from one place to the other, where an elevator ridge comes into another ridge, 2 or 3 ridges meet, and those bucks can go different ways. I'd much rather gamble on that when I'm hunting with the bow during the rut than a food plot. Putting that all together, it'd be great if you planned ahead and had a high old food plot right there at that bottleneck or pinch point, so those bucks slow down a little bit and give you a better opportunity to make the shot. In the previous episode, we talked about strategies for hunting the pre-rut, and we talked about scrapes. Scrapes are used a lot during the pre-rut, less and less each day as the rut gets closer. We get to that tipping point when there's so many does receptive that the bucks are no longer advertising, marketing, they're just seeking a receptive doe. So scrapes are probably gonna fill in with leaves that time of year. They're simply not being used. And I'm not spending time over a scrape specifically to hunt that scrape. It may be okay if it's right there in the pinch point, but I'd rather have a food source in the pinch point than a scrape at that time of year. Even during the rut, the number one motivation for a buck is survival. That's always going to be number one. But number 2 is certainly finding a receptive doe. And that's a time when calling can be very effective. 2 primary types of calling for whitetails is, of course, rattling and a grunt call. Rattling is loud and can travel. That sound can travel a long ways, but there's a lot of movement involved. So before you rattle, look around and make sure you're not going to get busted from all that movement. A grunt call doesn't travel as far. The sound doesn't travel as far, but it's communicating, it should communicate, an immature buck tending a receptive doe. And during the rut, oftentimes bucks aren't quite as cautious as during the pre-rut, where they're likely to try to circle downwind and smell which buck is there. They may run right in, and that gives you a better opportunity to use that call and have a buck respond without being busted.
Woo! Man, that's cool.
By the time the rut's in full force, there's been a lot of fighting and bucks sorting out dominance, and some bucks have been injured or they've been whipped. If you see the buck before you're calling, you want to read their posture, kind of read what they got going on, because if that buck's tail's tucked or has been blind in one eye or something like that, busted off an antler, you may not want to call because he may scurry the other way. Another time you may not want to call is if that buck is with the doe. I mentioned earlier the does can get harassed by multiple bucks. I'll throw in a little biology fact here. About 25% or more of twin fawns are stepbrother and stepsister. The doe was bred by multiple bucks in that short window she was receptive. They really get harassed. So if you've got a buck trailing the doe, he's not going to leave that doe. It's almost like a tom with a hen right in front of him. And you blow a grunt call or rattle, and it makes that doe think there's another aggressive buck in the area, she's probably going to bolt, and that buck's going to follow her. Hope you have a chance to get outside and try some of these techniques during the rut. If you try them and are successful or they fail, leave us a comment and share that experience with us so we can all learn. The rut's a great time of year if you're a deer hunter to be outside, but every day is a good day, and we should be thankful to the Creator for giving us just the opportunity to live and enjoy His creation. But even more important than enjoying His creation is to seek Him, seek His will, and apply it to our lives daily. Thanks for watching Growing Deer.